Well, let's watch this. Let's see what's going on with Mr. Pisco. Okay.
It's been about 2 months. Donald Trump has been in office and he is flooding the zone. Basically, everybody agrees. On the left and the right, the strategy appears to be do as much as you can, as fast as you can to overwhelm activists, opposition, and the courts. So there are a lot of things that the Trump administration has done so far for which he has drawn the ire of liberals, Democrats, and the left. And we are going to debate these issues largely from a legal context. And to kick it off, I think one of the biggest stories we've seen in the past couple of weeks has been the deportation or the revocation of visas from.
Hey, by the way, so being unmedicated has been a major handicap. Okay, I didn't realize how bad these deportations were of the people to El Salvador. I didn't realize how bad those deportations were. I didn't realize how bad the deportation of the like student activists was. Oh my god, guys, it is. But my god, the idea that we're deporting people for like it's for wrong think, like unironically, it's just wrong think. You don't believe, or you believe, or you support something that the state doesn't, so therefore we're going to deport you. And it's crazy seeing people like Brianna Wu, right? Someone who's ostensibly a liberal, ostensibly a Democrat, defending. Even, I'm sorry, I was never on the side of the Palestine protesters. They shouldn't get deported. That's unhinged. And let me tell you something. Hassan better watch his back. All right. If they're willing to start like pushing the envelope on green card and permanent residence, I don't think that any immigrant, someone who was born in another country, I do not think that you guys should feel safe. And for the first time, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. I used to say that all the time when I was a lefty, hey, trans women, like you guys need to like protect yourselves. You need, because like no one's coming to save you. You're going to need to arm up, I actually, you know what, was I on that train? I don't know. I probably had some, stop defending Harry Sisson. I haven't really talked about that whatsoever or looked into it whatsoever. If it's something that you want us to talk about, then post some links. I'm down to go over whatever random dude did. But yeah, like there's definitely been things that I have been like hyperbolic about, right? Like, yeah, they're coming for the trans women, they're putting them in camps, or oh, they're gonna come for the immigrants, and you guys better watch out, even if you have a green card or you have, a visa or whatever. That was hyperbolic in the past. It's not anymore. They are deporting people who have green cards. They are deporting permanent residents for having opinions counter to their own. And I don't even support what their protest was about. It was just it's just insane. we can't stand for this. We're in full on fascist territory. Stop defending Harry Sisson, by the way, because what he did was wrong. So maybe next time, I don't know, don't film him, but that's just me. He's the worst person on the planet. He's literally worse than Hitler. I haven't seen anything that made me think that he's worse than Hitler. You have to do a lot. There's like 6 million things more that he's going to have to do before he's as bad as Hitler. Okay. 11 million, actually, to be honest. What do you... Listen, I'm fine with shitting on Mr. Harry Sisson. All right. But let's be reasonable here. It wasn't hyperbolic in the past because they were always capable, willing, right? But in the past, we hadn't eroded everything to the point that we have now, right? There were more, roadblocks in the past, but there's not those roadblocks anymore. Those roadblocks went away because nobody's willing to stand up to Trump.
Students, from activists, protesters, and people with actual legal status in this country. Notably, Trump revoked the legal status of 530,000 immigrants who actually came here legally under a program started by Joe Biden. So we'll talk about that and a whole lot more. We got a couple gentlemen joining us to engage in this debate. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Pisco.
Identify yourself.
I do streams on YouTube on Pisco's Hour.
We're the
right on.
Yeah.
And what's your view? You love Trump.
No, I hate Trump. I think that Trump is doing an awful thing to the Constitution. But in this case specifically,
look at our boy Pisco going off doing content without Destiny being there. How sweet is that? He's really going out there, really, making a name for himself by himself. Isn't that sweet? Sorry, that sounds so condescending. He's a bigger content creator than me, but it's nice to see, genuinely. Forgot another super important thing happened. Someone got arrested for having a miscarriage in Georgia. Ooh, link me that. The problem is that they're willing to. Anytime you have someone willing to, there's a possibility, and it isn't hyperbolic. Will it happen? Well, no one knows until it happens or doesn't. But the fact that they're willing to is the problem. Well, hyperbolic, I would assume, right, based off of my plain understanding of the word, right, is to essentially you're overhyping the possibility of something. If I was going to say you guys are getting deported tomorrow in 2016, I would have been hyperbolic, but now I'm not, because it's likely to happen or at least it's possible to happen.
I think that there are a lot of conservatives that care about the First Amendment, or at least purport to care about the First Amendment. And there's on-point precedent from the Supreme Court that resident aliens get first.
Would I think any Republican candidate in the past before Trump was willing to do it January 6th? No, I wouldn't. That would be hyperbolic. There's nothing making anyone think that.
First Amendment rights. So why is Donald Trump doing the bidding of Israel and attacking the First Amendment rights of, for example, a green card holder who did nothing more than just, indicate their view as to, the situation in Palestine? It's completely unjustifiable.
Right on. Sir, do you want to grab that mic and pull it up?
Yeah, sure. All right. Is that better? Joe Neerman, a.k.a. GoodLogic. I host a YouTube channel and
isn't this guy
Rumble
on
channel
Wix
called
all the time?
GoodLogic. I'm a New York litigator.
See, I'm telling you guys. All right, I need to build up my my debate chops and my debate confidence again. All right, because right now confidence is at a low. All right, ability probably still at the same level, but confidence low. Confidence on information low. All right, we need to get back into it.
Who turned podcaster after COVID. I'm a massive free speech advocate, so much so that I actually sued Judge Merchan for his unconstitutional gag order of President Trump in pro se, in my own name, because I felt that the violation of his First Amendment right to speak was harming my First Amendment right to cover it as a member of the press. And I took that all the way up and applying to the Supreme Court. But on this particular issue, we're talking about Mahmod Khalil, this is not a First Amendment issue. Sometimes a free speech issue.
It absolutely is. I know I said that I wasn't going to pause it, but here's the issue. They're going to pull out this technical bullshit. Well, technically, they're here at the behest of the United States, and they're here at our pleasure. And if they start doing stuff like supporting people that don't, that don't align with the United States, technically, they don't have the right to just be here. Yeah, no one's saying that on a, well, I guess certainly people are saying on a legal level, but that's not what my argument is. It's that this is clearly it's not like this is being applied in a neutral way, right? It's not, I remember a long time ago, there was a discussion on Twitch politics. I can't remember about what, but it had to do with content neutral laws, right? This isn't neutral, right? It's because of or not content neutral, something else neutral. It's because of their views that they're being deported, right? They're being deported because of, XYZ reason. Technically, they found a legal reason for it, but the reason that they are deporting this person is because of wrongthink, and all of that, all of the pussyfooting around all of the rest of the issues here, the legality or anything like that, these people would not be deported. They would not be, investigated by ICE. They would not be, they would be living their lives as Americans. They have visas, they have green cards, they're permanent residents of the United States. Actually, the girl had a student visa, so I guess she wasn't permanent, but you know what I mean. These people are our neighbors, and we're just deporting them because they believe differently than us. I don't even agree with them, but we can't have that as our, we can't have that as our standard, right? Where every time there's a new administration, there's going to be some, every time there's a new administration, a different group of people is going to get deported based off of what they believe in. Like that can't be the standard. That can't be the way that we run things, dude.
Issue is a First Amendment issue. Often it is, but this is not a situation like that. I look forward to getting into it with you.
Right on. Well, everybody, make sure to smash the like button, share the show. Not just the immigration issue, but of course, there's a whole bunch of other issues, as you already brought up with the courts and how it affects Trump and this country. But let's just kick it off, man. Tell us what you think.
Yep.
Let me give a little bit of context. So Mahmod Khalil, he was one of the organizers of the protests we saw at Columbia. He had I believe it was a 2-year conditional green card, which got revoked by the State Department. He is currently pending deportation, but he's not the only one. I think there may be 4 others. These are individuals who are here on legal status with legal visas who are now having their visas revoked and facing deportation. The Trump administration says that Mahmoud was engaged in activities aligned with Hamas, and that was a national security threat. So there's a lot more to the story, but why don't you tell us what you
let's
think
first start with what this not.
See, it's what's so... We're stretching definitions.
Visas who are now having their visas revoked and facing deportation. The Trump administration says that Mahmoud was engaged in activities aligned with Hamas, and that was a national security threat. So
there it is. A national security threat. What is he charged with? Yeah, internet gas. Yeah, what is he charged with? He's not charged with anything. He's a national security threat. But how? Where's the I know that these people are using the technically this, technically this, technically this. Technically, if you're not a citizen, you don't get due process in the United States. This person is a green card holder. They are our neighbor. They would be given due process in every other situation possible. Like if they got a speeding ticket, they would get due process. I don't know. Yeah, and then there's like the guy who had the autism awareness tattoo. And they deported him because of that. Should Obama be reprimanded for drone striking U.S. citizens with no due process? You know what? I don't know very much about that case. But my understanding of it is that it was constitutionally and everything like questionable. It was questionable. It wasn't 100% certain that he did something illegal or something that he 100% did that was totally legal, right? But there was at least, consideration given to it, right? That's something I do know. There was consideration. We should do this. With this stuff, like we're deporting people who, like, all the conservatives told me, like, we're going to be going after the people who came here illegally, the people who lied to get here, the people who cheated to get here, blah 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 blah. But like here we have like direct evidence that they're doing not that. They're going after people who did go through the correct process to come here, who did go through all of the correct legal steps. They are not illegally here. They are deporting legal immigrants right now, like, and I started even giving it like conceding to conservatives, like, yeah, listen, you know what? You guys went on the border, deport the illegal immigrants. I don't care, because like there's so many things to argue about. It's just like, you know what? If you guys get the fight, just go for it. But this is proving that the mass deportations are not being taken care with any amount of care. They're not being taken care with any amount of process, any due process. There's nothing. They could be deporting U.S. citizens for all we know. But because we're not getting any information out of them, we're having to have reporters go and do their own research to find out, hey, this guy, he wasn't part of Trinidad, right? He has an autism tattoo. This guy wasn't part of Trinidad. He has a World Cup tattoo. Let's not forget Trump's first raid also led to the death of an American girl. That's true. An 8-year-old American girl. Also, the drone strike could have been criminal until Trump v. U.S. I don't know about that one. Oh, I see what you're talking about. The drone strike could have been criminal until Trump versus U.S. No one would say a court should never look at the drone strike. Yeah. Even some of the people from the El Salvador deportations came here legally through an amnesty process, and then we sent them effectively to a concentration camp. Yeah, I know. It's just like the war on terror gave great powers that would eventually get abused. Yeah, it's your guy that's abusing the powers. The guy that you guys said would never deport people who were legal citizens or who legally came here. But he is. And he's sending them to like hell on earth. Like, because people argue left and right about like the morality of prisons and what's good and what's bad, like, and they're like, I maybe one day I'll care about this. But for how bad the drug dealers and the the cartels are in Central America, I don't care that facility exists. What I do care about is innocent people being sent to a facility like that. It's like cartoonishly brutal. It is cartoonishly brutal. And we can't just poo-poo, I mean, the Patriot Act totally gave the president too much power. Yeah, like, I don't agree with Trump on this one. Like, no. Conservatives, you got to call it out. You guys, conservatives, Trump supporters got to call it out. On the stuff that matters, like deporting people without due process for having a autism tattoo, and then sending them to a like evil hell on earth labor camp in a foreign country where they might not even speak the language. But like conservatives, Trump supporters, you have to be the ones. You guys have to be the ones that call this shit out, because they're never going to listen to the Democrats. I've been pleasantly surprised to hear, I haven't seen it myself, to be honest, but to hear that even people like Lactoid TV or Rob Noor have been saying, hey, some of this shit's really crazy. I'm not on board with deporting people for disagreements. Oh, shit. A building in which people are legally held as a punishment for a crime they have committed or awaiting trial. Definition of a prison. These people weren't convicted and they aren't awaiting trial. We should say what it is. They are being sent to a concentration camp. I am not going to push back on anything that might be alarmist language, because at this point, I don't think there's much that you can say that is alarmist. It's pretty bad, guys. We're in a pretty bad position. And like to people like Letnergoat, to conservatives who are out there, like at a certain point, like you guys got to call it out when it gets to this, when it gets bad enough to where they're deporting people who came here legally. Like you guys gotta step up. You guys can't say, oh, well, we didn't know this was going to happen. Oh, well, I'm real mad at him about this. This is like really bad. And it's something that needs to stop. And those people need to be brought back. Even if they're going to get deported again, they should be given due process. They should be actually in the horrible, cartel before we send them to the concentration camp in El Salvador. People defending Trump using the Foreign Aliens Act forget the last time we used it was during World War II against American citizens. Yeah. Japanese internment camps. And they also did it to the Germans and the Italians. You're not safe just because you're white, folks. All right, let's keep going.
So there's a lot more to the story, but why don't you tell us what you
Let's
think
first start with what this is not about. It's not about criminal activity. It's not about alleged crimes. I think both of you can agree that we have to take the allegations of the government. We can't invent new rationales for why Mahmod Khalil is deportable. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't want to hear anything from people in the comments saying he occupied, he helped occupied, or that he's giving material support to Hamas. If the government does not allege that he's giving material support to Hamas, why should we at all assume that he is and invent new rationales for deporting him? And obviously there's no evidence that he's in connection with Hamas or giving any material support to them. So I think...
Oh, shit, dude. This is about to be the most autistic legal conversation of all time. I give Tim Pool 15 minutes before he cracks and starts screaming at in a melodramatic way at Pisco.
I think that the first point is some agreement that we only discuss the allegations and the actual basis of removability for Mahmod Khalil.
Well, I want to be clear before we begin this, so we frame our discussion in a healthy way. Whether we're talking about this from a legal perspective or from a moral perspective or philosophical American culture type of perspective, we can attack this as attorneys and talk about whether or not what's happening here and who's in the right and who's in the wrong. Or we can attack this as far as from a moral and philosophical perspective. And I want to make sure that we're both on the same page.
How am I? I'm good. This is the first stream back where I'm medicated, so we're rolling along. Again, like, for me, I'm not sure the legal argument. It would take a really good moral argument to make me care about the legal argument here. The moral thing for me is this: if someone's innocent, we shouldn't be sending them to jail for something that they didn't do. All right, that's like moral position number one. Number two, we shouldn't be deporting people over, misdemeanors. Okay, this really shouldn't be that hard, And you know what? I forgot about this, but let me see if I can pull this up. I talked like 2 weeks ago, maybe, about cruelty. And I don't know what this person's story is. You know what? Let's look into it. Maybe they are just like a horrible Virginia.
Bush Square article on...
No, that's not what I want. Oh, we don't need that anymore. We got Tim Pool. Wait, what was I just looking up? Oh, that's right. What's your name? Virginia Besora Gonzalez. We're still doing work, so just listening in and out. I hope to see you more. Thank you. Well, I will be streaming more because I have a new job and I'm medicated and everything's set up. Trump pardoned the largest drug dealer in U.S. history. Wait, really? I want to see if this person, was this person like a hardened criminal, or were they someone who trafficked fentanyl because that was how they were getting into the United States? The Silk Road guy? Oh, you know what? You're right. White House on Friday sparked debate online after sharing a Ghibli-style inspired image of convicted fentanyl trafficker Virginia Besora Gonzalez, who was arrested by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) last week. Like, the cruelty. Let me see here. I want to know what she did. What her actual... You're covering the text? Well, I'm not even at the point where we can read it. Nothing is... There's no text to read right now that's relevant. Here we are. I will change the layout in just a minute. Besora Gonzalez was first arrested in Pennsylvania in 2019 for attempting to distribute fentanyl and aiding a crime. She pled guilty and was sentenced to 12 months and 1 day in prison, followed by 4 years of supervised release. However, she was deported to the Dominican Republic in October of 2020 before completing her sentence. Despite her removal, she managed to return to the U.S. at an unknown date. ICE officials were alerted to her presence after receiving a tip-off on the 7th of March. Ooh, someone didn't like her, dude. Someone didn't like her, dude. She was arrested outside La Tierra del Caribe restaurant in North Philadelphia, where she allegedly worked as a cook. Her court-appointed attorney argued that she should not be detained before trial, stating that illegal reentry alone did not make her a flight risk. However, the government countered that her prior conviction and deportation cement the conclusion that a pretrial detention is required. and the White House has not responded yet. I need to know more about what she did. I don't think it really changes anything that I said before, though. Like, if it's like a hardened criminal, that is one thing. If it's someone who like tried to sell a little fin, and maybe not even because they wanted to, maybe because they were forced to, I'm not sure. I'm probably not going to care as much. The tattoo stuff has been used for years at judges' discretion for gangs, but also seems to go against the First Amendment. If someone like Pisco would explain it better, they'd listen. Well, yes, tattoos can be something that you use, but it's not something that can be. I don't know if it can be used as evidence, but it might be used as like probable cause. Maybe you would like this. You know what, Tron? If you can just like go into Paint and like draw me zones, right? And just say like, yo, I want the camera right here. Like that would be way more helpful. Camera right there, and then like in red, or wait, hold on, no. And then we'll make a red one, and this is like where you want me to put like the chat. That's what I need. Okay. Don't save. Oh, this isn't the one that we're watching. We're watching on this.
That we don't jump back and forth. That I'll make a point about the law, and you'll say philosophically that's wrong, or I'll make a point about philosophically, and you'll come back to the law. So can we pick one? And because I'm sure that Khalil loses on any of those, any way you look at it, philosophically, legally, or as far as more American, more constitutional perspective, like what's a healthy philosophy of our Constitution, he loses every way. So you pick the direction you want to go, and let's go there.
So to be clear, you're not willing to concede the legal argument here.
Which legal argument are you
That is
referring
the First Amendment argument. You're not going to concede it.
That this is a First Amendment argument?
You're not going to concede that Trump is violating the First Amendment by
not even close.
Okay,
no.
So let's deal with that first, because I think you would agree that if you thought that the First Amendment was being violated by Trump, you would have to condemn him, wouldn't you?
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the First Amendment's important to you. You just said that you went through all this.
I like how Pisco's main thing is just trying to get people to admit this. I'm giving you a binary choice. It is the worst, most rude piece of shit thing that you can possibly do in a debate, but it's because it's very lawyer-esque, but it is exactly on par for what we would expect for Mr. Lawyer Man. I feel like that's exactly the kind of person that you need to go on to a show like Tim Pool, because they've come up with 5 million ways to rationalize their thought process, right? Even though it's irrational, they've thought of a million ways to rationalize it.
Supreme Court,
So let's start there, and I think that would get into some, perhaps some philosophical territory. I'm not willing to shy away from that. I think it's also, a good idea, morally, practically, to have the First Amendment. But let's stick with the First Amendment. Okay. And so I guess my first question for you is: do you think Mahmod Khalil, a legal permanent resident, let's take the strongest case, do they have First Amendment rights? Yes or no?
Quick caveat. He wasn't a permanent resident. He had a conditional 2-year green card.
Sure, but do you want to assume, for the purpose of the hypothetical, that he is a permanent resident?
No, I'm not assuming anything,
Okay.
because you're saying he's acting unconstitutionally to change the nature of, as far as what the actual set of facts
He has a conditional green card, which basically means you have to reapply after 2 years to get like the 10-year green card visa. But for all intents and purposes, he is an LPR, and he has the government has cleared him to stay in this country. He just needs to go through a couple extra procedures to make sure that it's not a sham marriage, that kind of thing.
Are you willing to concede the fact that he obtained that green card through deceitful and illegal means?
No, I'm not. No, not at all. That's a pretext. But why don't we stick to the initial issue, which is, does he even have First Amendment rights?
Oh, so I'll say is the First Amendment rights that he enjoys, like any illegal alien, do exist and are not nearly the same level as the rights an American citizen has.
So to be clear, and I want to see what you think, you agree that LPRs, lawful permanent residents, even though it's conditional status, I understand that, have First Amendment rights. That is correct, right?
I don't know. I agree that the Supreme Court has said that there is some level of First Amendment rights, but ask yourself this: why? Why do they have any First Amendment rights? Why do we give them civil liberties? Why has the Supreme Court granted them those liberties, which were created for the protection of American citizens? So why is it, and for the benefit of American, right? Because you recognize our government was created by, for, and of the people.
It says we the people.
And the people are citizens, correct?
No, that's not true. The Constitution is clear where it wants to refer to persons and people and where it refers to citizens. For example, in the 14th Amendment, there's a privileges or immunities clause. It speaks about the privileges or immunities of citizens. When it's talking about the requirements for who's the president or for who is a senator, it says citizen. When it says, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, or for example, the right of the people to be free from, in their papers, persons, and effects from unreasonable searches and seizures. That's referring to persons. And there was a concept of personhood that was broader than citizenship from the attorneys who founded this country and made the Constitution. They were smart people.
So I just want to add, I actually agree. We've had this come up many times on our show. The 14th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, semicolon, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So what we've agree with my assessment on this, arguing that no, it's referring to citizens, and if you're not born, you're not a citizen, because when you get to the question of is the unborn a person, this clearly would protect the life of that person who is not yet a citizen, not yet born.
Yeah, I think that's a cop-out. I think that the courts ultimately will have to determine as a legal matter what is a person, what does that mean
I
for
agree.
purposes of constitutionality. Now, it could be that the originalist interpretation of person as understood at the time that the Constitution was framed only involved born alive persons. That's not an inconsistent position. Or it could be the case that that the people who founded this country would have considered a person to be someone who is, in utero. So I don't pretend to know the actual legal analysis here, but I'm glad, Tim, that you agree that, even the First Amendment, let's take a look at the First Amendment, doesn't refer to persons or citizens. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
Respecting an establishment, I think.
Of religion.
If we could just look for a moment, at what Tim just read with respect to the 14th Amendment, and the language there is important, and you read it quickly, and I understand why. But there's a distinction there as far as between citizens and persons in that 14th Amendment. And what is promised to persons, those who are not citizens? What's promised them is life, liberty, and due process, not the civil rights in general.
And
so
and did they get due process when they were scooped up off of the streets and accused of being gang members and then deported to El Salvador? Were they given that due process? Because my understanding is no, they weren't.
say that applies, it actually is implicitly against your position. It's actually going to the point that citizens specifically are the ones who have crafted for them our civil liberties, and the only protections that America is willing to afford to those people who are not citizens of this country is life, liberty, and due process.
Well, clearly the Supreme Court disagrees with you. You acknowledge the Supreme Court disagrees with you.
What I'm saying is,
do you acknowledge that, yes or no?
I agree that we talk
Yes
about
or
the
no?
Wixing case.
Determined as a legal matter.
On the clarification of what makes someone a citizen. So there's two distinct definitions here. The reason this has come up is actually the pro-life, pro-choice abortion debate in the question of whether or not an unborn child is a person. Interestingly, and I don't mean to be hyper-partisan on this one, but when it comes to the liberal faction, they actually disagree with my assessment on this, arguing that no, it's referring to citizens, and if you're not born, you're not a citizen. Because when you get to the question of is the unborn a person, this clearly would protect the life of that person who is not yet a citizen, not yet born.
Yeah, I think that's a cop-out. I think that the courts ultimately will have to determine as a legal matter what is a person, what does that mean
I
for
agree.
purposes of constitutionality. Now, it could be that the originalist interpretation of
Does anybody use the argument that we should allow abortion because they're not citizens and therefore they don't have civil rights? Has anybody ever heard that argument before? Because I have not. I have never heard that argument before. That's crazy.
person as understood at the time that the Constitution was framed only involve born alive persons. That's not an inconsistent position. Or it could be the case that that the people who founded this country would have considered a person to be someone who is, you know, in utero. So I don't pretend to know the actual legal analysis here, but I'm glad, Tim, that you agree that, you know, even the First Amendment, let's take a look at the First Amendment, doesn't refer to persons or citizens. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
Respecting an establishment, I think.
Of religion or
if we could just look for a moment, if we just look in a moment at what Tim just read with respect to the 14th Amendment, and the language there is important, and you read it quickly, and I understand why, but there's a distinction there as far as between citizens and persons in that 14th Amendment. And what is promised to persons, those who are not citizens? What's promised them is life, liberty, and due process, not the civil rights in general. So to say that applies, it actually is implicitly against your position.
What's so crazy is in order to defend this, conservatives are having to argue against the concept of giving people civil rights. Like, is that not literally 100% actually what he's doing right now? Is arguing against giving people civil rights?
Position. It's actually going to the point that citizens specifically are the ones who have crafted for them our civil liberties, and the only protections that America is willing to afford to those people who are not citizens of this country is life, liberty, and due process.
Well, clearly the Supreme Court disagrees with you. You acknowledge that the Supreme Court disagrees with you.
What I'm saying is,
do you acknowledge that? Yes or no?
I agree that when you talk about the Wixing case that you're thinking of, recognizes that there are some civil liberties that are afforded to people who are not.
In that case, specifically the First Amendment, is that right?
So, yes.
Okay, and it's not just the First Amendment. There's procedural due process cases that aliens have access to. I'm using the term alien here because that's the term used in the
because it's the proper term. It's the proper term. That's why.
I don't think it's a nice thing to
your
call
audience
an alien,
is not offended. Don't worry.
But listen, I want to be accurate here. It says that aliens have access to, for example, you can't just throw them out of the country.
I don't think, just as a matter of strategy, I don't think that you should ever quibble about the language unless it is I'm dead. I'm not prepared for this.
Country summarily. There are procedural due process issues, even for people
the APA
here illegally. Well, not even in the absence of the Administrative Procedures Act. There's a constitutional notion of procedural due process that has purchase on persons, and
as said in the 14th Amendment, and they're entitled to due process.
And in the Fifth Amendment against the federal government, which is what is at issue here. What you just said and what you acknowledged is, despite what you might think about why the country was formed, the consistent case law has been that persons in this country have access to a lot of civil liberties. I don't know why we wouldn't extend it to the First Amendment if you acknowledge there's case law on point about it. And specifically when the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
Right, and the Supreme...
Did y'all see the executive order on election security? There's no way to keep up with everything that's going on right now with my life and schedule as it is. Like, I know everyone uses that as an excuse, and like, this is supposed to be what I care about the most and all that stuff. But yeah, I am not caught up. Now that I have my Vyvanse, though, maybe I'll be able to catch up a little bit easier now, but we'll have to see. One second. I just really want to like be at full health before I go back up there and have to fight more guys with grenades and shit. Nope, it's all used up. I would never take the conservative side on this, mainly because I do think they have these liberties and due process, but because my abortion argument when it comes to the 14th is that I think illegals should be able to have firearms and due process and equal protections. Wait, I'm confused. How does your abortion stance inform your stance on illegals owning weapons? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Supreme Court has recognized, while they recognize the First Amendment right, they also have equally recognized that the First Amendment right of someone who's visiting this country are not as robust as the protections that American citizens have. Do you admit that?
I'm not so sure. For people already admitted into the country. So there's a difference that I acknowledge that the country makes between exclusion matters and for people who are in the country. The key example of this, by the way, are the Chinese exclusion cases. I'm sure that you guys, maybe your audience is not familiar, but there was a point, the first restrictive immigration laws in this country, up until 1870 thereabout, we had open borders policy in this country. complete open borders, except for the Alien Enemies Act and the Alien Friends Act, which maybe we'll get to.
This is actually pretty interesting because it actually functioned this way well after the 1800s. I went to San Diego and was talking with people on both sides of the border. And it's actually, I think in the past, I don't know, what, 50, 60 years, where the border became heavier. And it used to be, even up to like the early 1900s, you could just walk into San Diego and back and forth. Only recently, I guess, with national security concerns, communications, and population density, has it become much more rigid.
Yeah, that's totally correct. And the first restrictive immigration laws were against Chinese people. It said, well, the first it was vagrants and stuff, but ultimately it said Chinese.
And there was a, I can't remember where, it might have been Vosh, it might have been Destiny, it might have been any number of people at the beginning of my streaming career who said this, or it might have been something that I found in my own research. But I believe there was a researcher who said that the way that we used to do, the way that we used to have our border set up with Mexico and Canada was really, really good for the economy, because when we wanted seasonal workers, they could just come on over and then they could, work for that season, and then they could go back when the season was over, and they didn't stay here, and wasn't a problem. They just went back when it wasn't growing season, right? Because we changed our laws and our border laws in the way that we did, it made it to where it wasn't worth, crossing the border every year, right? Because you could get caught and then you'd get in trouble. It was better just to, cross the border and stay on one side or the other. I don't remember where I heard that, but I don't know why that's not an option that conservatives talk about, like make it to where they can go back and forth as they want. That's just what I say when someone is like that's just what I say when someone is like the 14th says you have to be born to be a citizen. So I say, F you, I will pivot. Well, you say that we should not give rights to illegals. It's more of a secret. Oh, okay, I got you. These
people, if you're of Chinese or Asian descent, you can't enter the country. And that case has not been overturned. Right. And you acknowledge that. So I recognize, I hope that you're not.
I'm not sure what your point is as far as that case not being overturned.
So the point,
if that's still binding law today.
So the point is, I recognize, even though I may disagree, that and it's interesting, I think, that Trump did not argue that it actually was a Muslim ban and seemed to assume that a Muslim ban, when he instituted his travel ban, would be unconstitutional. So I don't know how viable that precedent is. But in the Chinese exclusion cases, that there is a difference in the law between an exclusion matter and someone who's in the country. So no, I actually don't recognize, and I don't know that to be the case, that individuals in this country, even if they're not permanent residents, don't have First Amendment rights.
Well, you should review Trump v. Hawaii. You should review Reno versus AADC. There have been a myriad of Supreme Court cases which have recognized the fact that those who are visiting this country, not simply when they're abroad, that we're going to give. I don't know what type of free speech limitations you think that they would be, that we're not going to promise free speech to some foreigner who's out in Greenland or well, Greenland soon to be America, but who's out in the UK, and say that we recognize that they have a right to speak. That doesn't even mean anything.
So then here's the question: if Trump issued an order tomorrow and said, if you're a Jew, your student visa is being revoked,
right,
would that be constitutional or not? Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because the threshold minimum, because, and here's the thing, I've allowed you to engage this conversation in good faith as if this is about First Amendment rights, when this is not at all a First Amendment issue. This is purely an immigration issue. And this is what I was saying with respect to the fact that while I'm a free speech advocate, I don't think that this in any way touches on free speech and the concept of our First Amendment rights. And the reason it doesn't is because when you're talking about immigration law, that is where government powers are at their zenith, as opposed to when you're talking about the First Amendment rights of individuals, the First Amendment rights of someone who's merely visiting this country are at their nadir. So what you are trying to postulate here is that this individual whose rights are lower than yours or mine.
Why? I'm sorry. There might be legal merit to this. We're still listening, right? Maybe we'll be convinced by one side or the other. I gotta say, does this not sound like the most un-American shit in the entire world? Like talking about who does get rights and who doesn't get rights, and who gets more rights and who doesn't get. Like, what happened to the Republican Party, man? What the, like, listen to this. Like, if you're a citizen here, then your rights are considered at their zenith, and if you're a visitor here, they're at their whatever the opposite word that I'd never heard someone use before. He said.
While I'm a free speech advocate, I don't think that this in any way touches on free speech and the concept of our First Amendment rights. And the reason it doesn't is because when you're talking about immigration law,
because it's not touching my First Amendment rights. It's attacking, theirs, which doesn't bother me at all.
That is where government powers are at their zenith, as opposed to when you're talking about the First Amendment rights of individuals, the First Amendment rights of someone who's merely visiting this country are at their nadir. So what you are trying to postulate here is that,
again, I was brought up to think that America was the land of the free, where everyone has equal rights, right? Where we don't, we're not going to around the edge, all right? We're not going to around the edge about whether or not you can say something, because we know that you can say it, because it's not illegal to say something in the United States, because your speech is protected. That's the country that I was raised in. This is so crazy. I have never in my life thought to myself, man, you know what? I want to go online right now, and I'm going to find myself a debate of a conservative defending the idea that not everyone should have equal rights. Actually, you know what? When I say it out loud like that, it's actually, I could probably find a million debates like that of conservatives arguing that some people deserve fewer rights than others. Actually, that might be a conservative just position.
That this individual whose rights are lower than yours or mine, whose rights are not as robust with respect to his First Amendment rights, is now challenging the decision-making powers of the President of the United States with respect to international affairs and national security, which is where the Constitution carves out the strongest powers and protections and says this is the exclusive domain of the executive branch. That is what you're in conflict here and saying this is unconstitutional.
If it's true for free speech, it's true of the religion clauses. The immigration plenary power framework that you've just laid out would apply just as strongly to an argument from free speech, which is in the First Amendment, as to the religion clauses that are in the First Amendment.
Here's why he's wrong, if I could just correct that. No, the reason you're mistaken about that is because the Supreme Court, in its insight, has pointed out that the threshold that you have to meet on an immigration issue is that it has to be facially legitimate and bona fide. Facially legitimate and bona fide. So if you talk about some law that the president would throw out there saying, I don't want any more black people coming into this country, or Muslims or Jews or redheaded Irish people, that is not facially legitimate and bona fide, and it wouldn't pass that threshold.
What if he says Muslims are more likely to do terrorist acts? What if
he says Muslims, so that's not if he says that as Muslims, if he says terrorists, that's
no, he
a
says
problem.
Muslims are more likely to commit terrorist acts, and it's facially legitimate. I want to.
For me, that's not facial. I don't see how that would be, because to say that everyone who's a member of this religion, which is being practiced by over 1 billion people, is a terror threat, is not facially legitimate and bona fide.
Why is it facially legitimate to say anyone who advocates in support of, even just assume? I do not take it for granted. I just want to be clear. I don't take it as a fact that Mahmod Khalil supports Hamas. I don't take that as a fact. Let's assume he does. Okay. Why is it facially legitimate to say that what would be, I think you would agree, free speech for citizens? I think you've agreed that LPRs have First Amendment rights. What's the legitimacy in targeting what otherwise would be clearly protected speech?
Just one more. What was LPR?
Lawful permanent resident.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So the difference, I would definitely agree that all the actions that we know of that Mahmod Khalil has taken, if it was taken by an American citizen, that the government would be completely out of bounds and wrong for in any way infringing on that. At the same time,
well, I got to ask you: does the First Amendment pertain to illegal activities?
No.
Well, it defines the scope of what is and what's not legal sometimes. For example, so the First Amendment, if there were a law that said it's illegal to talk to your neighbor. It's illegal to hand out pamphlets in support of Donald Trump, even though there's a law that says it's illegal to do criminality. The Constitution supersedes. And so to the extent that there's an application of law, for example, in the INA that purports to make something illegal, or it would have no purchase if it conflicted with First Amendment precedent.
Did Mahmod Khalil occupy any buildings illegally?
There's no allegation to that effect. And so why should we consider it? There's no allegation of that. In fact, there's reporting that says that he purposely did not attend any of these sit-ins for the reason of he's worried about the status of his green card.
I could be wrong.
Damn,
but,
is that true? He didn't even because he was scared about his green card. He didn't want to risk that. He specifically didn't go. If that's true, bro, because the strongest, and I still think it's a weak argument, the strongest argument that people could make is that, oh, well, actually they're being deported because they did, XYZ thing. And because they did XYZ thing, they trespassed or they barricaded, they are no longer welcome here or whatever, like, okay. This is the best advertisement Pisco could ever hope for legal counsel. Maybe. I mean, I don't know if anyone's going to hire him off of being on Tim Pool, although it will probably lead to him getting more opportunities to be on other things, which is why if I can think of a good topic, because it doesn't seem like this is I thought that this was going to be more like the normal Tim Pool show, Literally, no, I mean, like, I know I was offered, but I just, this is where I'm at. All right, Parallax. If I'm going to go on, number one, I was told that I need to find someone to go on with, someone to debate with. And then number two, I need to like have a topic that I'm like read up on, because they wouldn't even have to fly me out, I'm not that far from it, because evidently he's in West Virginia, right? I should be able to make that drive. I think he wants to be a judge. That would be really cool. Judge Pisco. They had Admiral Gibbs. We should watch that one. We should watch the Gibbs one.
There were conversations and videos, I believe, that showed Mahmod Khalil inside buildings that had been under quote unquote student occupation.
At the time they were occupied, or any time that
at the time they were occupied.
Okay, well, listen,
I could be wrong though.
I read reporting that said that effectively that he was keeping away from those areas. But even if it were true, don't you agree that Trump, if he wants to do that, he should charge him with, or he should get someone to charge him with a crime? Because in this country, there's a line between admissibility, basis of removal and deportable basis of removal. And in order to be deportable on the basis of something like, for example, occupying a building, I assume he would need a conviction under that.
No.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, it would be much worse if Trump had charged him with a crime. If his DOJ went out and charged him with a crime, I would be much more bothered by the action, because that would now be because that would be punishing him for his free speech. The Supreme Court has said definitively that deportation and removal is not considered a punishment. I urge you to check. I'll give you the citations. 525 U.S. 471. The case is Reno versus Anti-American Discrimination Committee or Commission. That case spells out very clearly. You cannot pretend, first and foremost, that it is considered criminal punishment, and also that he's held.
I agree. I agree that immigration is not a criminal punishment.
So that's
I totally agree that that's the precedent of the court.
So then ask yourself this: how is it a First Amendment violation at all?
First Amendment does not just arise under criminal actions. For example, if the government said that you can't get a liquor license if you're a Jew, or you can't get a liquor license if you support Trump, I think that you would agree that's not a criminal action, but the First Amendment still has purchase. And yes or no?
And that
yes?
again is
that
not
a yes?
bona fide.
Wait, is that yes?
You're trying to like catch me on a gotcha.
No, but
moment, and what I'm saying
you just said it was only for criminal matters, and I just want to be clear to the audience: is it only for criminal matters?
What I'm saying is that with respect to someone who's an illegal alien, we are talking about whether or not it's bona fide, it's facially
He's not an illegal alien
and legitimate.
He's not an illegal alien.
I'm saying is someone who's not an American citizen.
Let me ask you guys for clarification, because the Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 221, subsection I, says after the issuance of a visa or other documentation to any alien, the consular officer or the Secretary of State may at any time in his discretion revoke such visa or other documentation. This
is I think the argument that people are pulling from when I'm like seeing people talk about it. And the issue is that the discretion that they're using here, the discretion is because he supports a group that they don't like. That is what the discretion is. And just because someone can do something does not mean that they should do something.
There's more to that. There's exceptions. I don't know that I need to read the whole thing. I think you're both familiar with this. So how does this pertain to Mahmoud?
Yeah. So there's wide deference in this country for the Secretary of State, for the Attorney General, for the Department of Homeland Security, for the President himself to make all kinds of decisions that would prejudice this his right to be in this country. I don't deny that there's the case law is that there's no substantive right for non-citizens to be in this country, that Congress tomorrow could pass a law that says everyone who's not a citizen needs to leave. You don't have a substantive right to be here. But here's the question. Can you do it for illegitimate purpose that's reprehensible under the Constitution? Using the statute, not saying that the statute itself is unconstitutional facially, but as applied,
does he support that
could
they
you
don't
say, for
like?
example,
Wait, who are you talking
in my
about?
discretion, because you are a Jew, I am taking away your visa? The answer is no, right?
Well,
would you agree?
So far, what I've gotten from what you're saying is that it sounds like the reason the Trump administration has not accused him of a crime pertaining to those protests and has simply cited national security concerns is to avoid a hearing based on the arguments you're making.
Yeah, that's reprehensible, isn't it?
Well,
No,
I mean,
that's not what happens.
Well, but the issue is,
If it's true, would it be reprehensible to we're really doing this for the crime, but we're kind of sneaking it in? Wouldn't that be horrible?
I don't know that they're actually doing it for the crime.
If
I'm
they
saying
did it.
if Donald Trump said we don't want people who are not citizens to try and influence our government.
No. If it was a pretext, right? So if it were true that he wants to punish Mahmod Khalil for actual criminal acts, but he's just trying to do it faster through this other method.
Well, there's a lot in there. The word punish, for instance. If I don't want to ascribe anything. And what I'm trying to get at is, if Donald Trump were to say we need pretext to remove this man, he's going to find himself in 1A hearings.
Would he find himself an enemy of you, or would you condemn him for coming up with pretexts to remove people or to punish people?
But again, just to clarify, because I want to make sure we get the full point before we get into that. The issue appears to be that the Secretary of State has the legal right for any reason in his own discretion at any time to revoke an alien's visa
Under the law, but as applied, could they violate the Constitution? So I'll ask you, Tim,
So under the law, but would these free speech warriors, would they actually go so far as to say that, like, there's no way
in his own discretion at any time?
There's no way that they're going to say that the Supreme or the Secretary of State should use his discretion if he doesn't like someone to deport them. There's no way that they would ever, mind you, be okay with that. And that's a good thing that they wouldn't be okay with that. Because if there was a conservative who is getting deported for being a conservative, I would hope that we could all come together and say, hey, this is a bad thing. We shouldn't deport people just for having disagreements. They're accusing him of liking Hamas. I'm not sure if he does like Hamas, but they're deporting him because he supports a group that the government doesn't like. No evidence, though. Yeah, that's the thing that gets me, is that there's no evidence for anything either. So, like, they literally just, like, black-bagged. They black-bagged 2 people for protesting. Even if they, like, because, again, they're not alleging that they broke anything. They're not alleging that they barricaded themselves in. They're alleging that they support terrorists.
To revoke an alien's visa.
Under the law, but as applied, could they violate the Constitution? So I'll ask you, Tim, if he said, in my discretion, I'm going to revoke the visa because he's a Jew, you think that would be illegal?
To revoke someone's visa for being a Jew?
Correct. In the exercise of discretion, would you say, for example, well, it says he can revoke it for any reason. Would you say that's legal?
It's a good question. What I would say is...
You can say, I don't know.
I do want to address it real quick because my answer is I don't know, because you have 2 areas. One where the law literally says for any reason, but then you run into the constitutional argument where that law can't be applied as it goes to the First Amendment.
Yep.
So Tim, doesn't
I don't know.
doesn't the threshold the Supreme Court laid out that for some reason you don't...
That might have been like as weaselly as it is, that's actually a pretty decent question because of it's a pretty decent question for the reasons he laid out, right? While talking to two lawyers. That was actually like, you know what? You don't have to give it to Tim Pool like basically ever, but I'll give him a 50% kudos there. That was a smart question there. Okay. Here's the basic details. Skip halfway. It's the wrongdoing of the guy.
We are closely watching two big developments today surrounding Mahmod Khalil. He's the graduate student at Columbia University who has led pro-Palestinian protests and is currently being detained.
First today, a New York judge is hearing a case Khalil and several other students are bringing against Columbia. They're trying to prevent the university from sharing their disciplinary records with the government. Also, the Department of Justice has just filed new allegations against Khalil. They claim he withheld his membership in certain organizations, as well as parts of his employment history when he applied for permanent residency in the United States. Joining us now, NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton. So, Antonia, a lot to unpack here, but let's start with today's hearing. What should we know?
Well, the hearing is still ongoing. Our colleague Adam Reese is there right now getting all the notes and information for us.
And again, they're alleging these things, but this hasn't been proven in a court. He didn't get due process. They didn't, let him lawyer up and, prove that he was or prove that he wasn't lying about these things during his thing. They just did it. You bitch. Stop moving.
But this is a hearing.
Oh, wait, hold on. That was relevant.
You just want to toss it, you want to just disregard completely when you give these a crazy example of let's ban all Jews, let's ban all Muslims, let's ban all redheads. Is that facially legitimate and bona fide? You seem to keep just walking, like dancing right past
No,
that.
I'm not. Wait,
That's the
wait,
essence
I acknowledge that the
your
Chinese
hypotheticals are a joke because of that.
So
they don't meet that very tiny threshold.
So I want to be very clear. I started that entire conversation by saying the Chinese exclusion laws are still good law. And even though I don't necessarily agree with them, wait, you think that Chinese exclusion laws are not good law?
What I'm saying is that as of today, you think it's legal today to exclude Chinese?
Immigration lawyers cite that case repeatedly, all the time, with respect to these kind of issues with constitutionality. Che Ching-ping, Fang Wei-ting, these are cases that the Supreme Court is, they constantly are cited there. They have not developed anti-precedent status yet. And I wanted, because you accused me of dancing around that issue, I started that conversation by saying and recognizing the law, which says that by the law, those cases have not been overturned. What I said was that's an exclusion decision. That's an exclusion decision that's different than when you're in the interior of the country.
So I have a question for you guys. And I think I have two questions. The first one's extremely obvious. If a black man walked into a bakery and they said, we don't serve black people, that is illegal.
That's illegal under the the civil rights framework.
Right.
It's private discrimination, different situation.
Right. So in the instance where the individual walks into the store and the owner says, sir, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody, please leave.
Yeah.
Well, that's not an issue of racism or a violation of the Civil Rights Act.
That's a great example, Tim, and I really appreciate it because that goes to show you the extent to which the government actually has latitude in all kinds of. They could have done it through another means. They could have said, we're doing it because there's bullshit about the lie, which we can get into on your green card application. They could have found some other means. They could have charged them with a crime with a neutral ground, but they didn't. The reason they said it's because you support Hamas is because they're trying to signal, they're trying to bully private actors, just like they're doing with the universities, just like they're doing with the firms, just like we're doing with all these actors. They're trying to put a signal and say, hey, if you disagree with us on policy on Israel, we're going to make you hurt. And so you're right. If they actually thought he was a security threat, why not go through the other methods of doing so? But they said it specifically, and Rubio's coming out.
So this is about the Jews? That's what it's about?
No, listen, you agree. This is about authoritarianism and coercion. Donald Trump doesn't give a about the First Amendment.
Oh my God. You see, this is
he's suing a pollster.
I'm so tired of leftists just coming to these conclusions.
And now he's found a way that he can move on from the conversation at hand. Oh no, he said something mean about Daddy Trump. Now we're going to move off from the topic at hand because, oh no, we can't have people saying something mean about Daddy Trump. This is exactly what I would expect from the evil left. Where's the other one? Come here. And now the rest of this conversation is completely tainted. Well, actually, I guess we'll have to see. We'll have to see if the rest of the conversation is tainted.
As far as I can look inside his head, and I know better than anyone exactly what Trump is really thinking, even though I've seen policy after policy that is issued that has had nothing to do whatsoever with reaching the conclusions I've reached, I'm still going to come out here and tell you, I know what he's thinking. He doesn't care about the First Amendment. He doesn't care about due process. He only cares about himself. You can see one piece of evidence after another about this, and you're going to come out there and you're going to say to yourself, oh no, I know better than you, everyone else. Why? Because I'm sitting here on the outside. Even though I've been tilted and I've come across him every single way, I'm going to look at any way I possibly can to frame it against him.
There is no other explanation. There is no other explanation.
God, what a victim complex from this guy for someone that doesn't even know who he is or care about him.
Because I'm sitting here on the outside.
One second.
Here and tell you, I know what he's thinking. He doesn't care about the First Amendment. He doesn't care about due process. He only cares about himself. You can see one piece of evidence after another about this, and you're going to come out there and you're going to say to yourself, oh no, I know better than you, everyone else. Why? Because I'm sitting here on the outside. Even though I've been tilted and I've come across him every single way, I'm going to look at any way I possibly can to frame it against him.
There is no other explanation. There is no other explanation. If they thought it was because of his criminal conduct, they would say so. If they thought it was, and now they have this bullshit pretext about after the
what
fact
they
that
said
lied.
was, let's look at what they did say. What they said was that we consider him a national security issue. What is this proper procedure to do under that?
And do you think that just because someone disagrees with some policy of whatever administration is currently in power, do you think that they should be at risk of being deported because the administration claims that they are a national security threat with no recourse, with no judge talking, like taking the case, like nothing? It's just, oh, well, sorry, dude. There's a Republican in office now, so you get deported. Oh, sorry, conservatives, sorry, any conservative that comes here on a visa, you're getting deported because we don't like what you're a national security threat. We think that you're going to create some homegrown terrorists. Like this can't be the standard. This can't be the standard, dude.
Issue under that setting. And the proper procedure is laid out in the APA that I started with, that you wanted to just jump away from. The APA and the steps that they were actually taking was saying, we're going to process him through an administrative immigration judge, and he's going to examine this to make sure that we are not just capturing him, throwing a bag over his head, and
like they're doing with the Venezuelans. Like they're doing with the Venezuelans, yes?
I don't know.
Like they're doing with the Venezuelans, not even giving them the opportunity to file habeas petitions.
What I'm saying,
it's disgusting. You're defending this regime.
Habeas petitions are not. You're not entitled to a habeas petition the moment that you.
Oh, you want to go through the courts? That's for citizens. Oh, you want human rights? Those are for citizens. Oh, you want to not be sent to a concentration camp? That's an option. That's right. Only for citizens. What is wrong with you, dude? Oh, they can't even file with the court because they're not citizens? Is that what he's trying to say here?
When you get arrested,
the DC Circuit Court of Appeals said.
That's you're mistaken. Supreme Court does not allow you to just automatically get a habeas petition. You cannot get it under 12.
Habeas petition refers to a legal document filed by a prisoner or someone on their behalf requesting a court to review the legality. So they're not even allowed to petition for due process. They just get deported. It's game over. You lose. Holy shit. This argument on the conservative side would make more sense if someone was saying, like, I'm glad they ran planes into the Twin Towers. A disagreement over foreign policy is not really a security risk. Yeah, exactly. Like, the fact that there's not been any even attempts, like there's not even been an attempt to let these people have a say, right? To like have anything be heard, like nothing whatsoever. They're just black bagging people. This isn't a question of security risks. They're just doing bad things. They're just doing really bad things. It is just what they are doing. Okay, let's keep watching for a minute.
1252G, I believe. You cannot go to the federal district court until such time as you've exhausted
They said
all
we don't
your
even need to
administrative
send
process.
them notice. They said we didn't even need to send these people that were throwing bags over their heads, going to the tarmac and trying to get them off the plane before the court opens. They said we don't even need to, in court, by the way, in court, they said we don't even need to tell their lawyers where they're at. We don't even need to give them notice of the basis of their removal.
You're making
the
a
fact that you would
factual claim.
defend this
So
criminal regime and say Trump cares about rights, it's the most preposterous thing I've ever heard.
Okay, so let's come to a conclusion here. So you agree that Mahmod Khalil, everything's fine. Now you want to move on to the case.
No. I just want to be clear because what I'm telling to Tim, I think I saw some nodding there from Tim. I wanted to see if you agree. Because you saw
the nodding was the Israel stuff.
Well, it seems like that is what he's trying to do. He's trying to signal
absolutely
100%.
So, but I'll clarify too, because you know what? One thing that frustrates me is there are I call them the Jews people, where they think everything's the Jews all the time. Yeah. I think this is purely related to American foreign policy. I think this country wants to fund its foreign military operations. Israel's a strong ally. The U.S. wants to give them money, wants to be involved, wants military there. I don't think it's the Jews. I think it's a strategic location for U.S. Middle Eastern operations. And you've got these protests that are emerging and influence spreading across universities, which are counter to American foreign policy interests, largely that I disagree with. So I do think Trump is trying to send a message. That's why Romesa, I believe her name was.
Yep.
Ozturk, she had her visa revoked. I believe it was presumably based on a pro-Palestinian paper that was written. Now, that doesn't go to the question of whether or not they have the legal right to do it, but I think the motivation strongly has to do with.
I mean, they're posting the Studio Ghibli of them deporting people.
Yeah.
They're posting ASMR.
But I'll just real quick.
I don't know. That's a little.
Pisco is like the perfect balancing act of soy and cool. It really does. I'm just, kill me. Yeah, it's fine. I deserve it. It's fine. But yeah, no, like I think that the way that he argues is like a great way to make people hate you. That was close. Another one. I'm dead. Yeah, sometimes he's cool, sometimes he's soy, but in general, I would say I'd say he's cool more often than not. He was coached by Destiny. You know what? Kill me. Yep. He was coached by Destiny. That doesn't surprise me. I don't think that I don't think that these people are going to stick to hating Destiny. I don't think that they have it in them. Like Erudite obviously is already, back.
A little different because it's not the Israel issue.
I just want to say, because we talked about this last night, that's a fentanyl dealer. And
I understand, but the whole purpose is to send signals.
I think Trump is trying to trick the left by doing that into defending one of the most.
Well, I'll defend reprehensible people if it means defending our rights. Right now, yeah, I'll absolutely.
But that's the point.
You're not defending our rights.
I am defending our rights.
No, it's not our rights.
Yes, it is.
Unless you're here via green card or visa, you're not defending our rights. You are defending the rights that America decides to confer on people who are not citizens of her nation.
But you just agreed that Mahmoud Khalil.
Here's my thing. Like, I'm sorry. It's time for those slippery slope arguments, dudes. It's time for those slippery slope arguments. If they start deporting people who are legally here because of disagreements, I have no faith that they won't start deporting people who are like full-fledged citizens for disagreements. How can you think Trump is a genius? Sycophantry. Okay, I desperately need health. There's a little bit of health. It's not really doing too much for me. I'll let them fight that out for a minute. The way Pisco has said some stuff make me think he would want to be a judge over sure. Oh, well, sure. Maybe that's the case. I can certainly see that being I don't know. I feel like the thing everybody wants right now is to be a YouTuber. Pisco already has that going on. So I would just assume that he also wants that, but maybe I'm making bad assumptions. I've always wanted to do something broadcasty, I've always liked the idea of radio. I've done radio before. I've done YouTube channels before, Let's Plays and D&D live stream channels before I knew that was a popular thing. So I just assumed that, probably most people also want something similar. Most people want to be at least a little famous, right? Turkish Pikachu? I have not. The day after they deported people to El Salvador, Trump said he would deport people vandalizing Tesla there too. Yeah. People, wait, oh shit, I didn't mean to do that.
Reprehensible people if it means defending our rights. Right now, yeah, I'll absolutely.
But to me, that's the point.
You're not defending our rights.
I am defending our rights.
No, it's not our rights.
Yes, it is.
Unless you're here via green card or visa, you're not defending our rights. You are defending the rights that America decides to confer on people who are not citizens of her nation.
But you just agreed that Mahmod Khalil has First Amendment rights. You just said...
I said they are limited First Amendment rights.
What is the First Amendment? What kind of rights would it be that, okay, you have rights, but you can't say what we want you to say, otherwise we'll throw you out of the country?
Well,
what sense is that a right?
I have an honest question for you guys.
I'll tell you. I'll answer. Can I answer his question?
Yeah.
How is that a right? It's a right in that he's not sitting in a prison, and I don't want him. And if
he's sitting in a jail right now.
No, what I'm saying is that's a detention awaiting for processing.
Cold comfort.
What's cold comfort?
Cold comfort for his wife, who is now 8 months pregnant and didn't even know where he was, and obviously and has a kid on the way, and is trying to get information from the administration on where he is.
I have a question for you guys. The Constitution applies to non-citizens.
Yes.
The Bill of Rights do. Can they buy guns? As an honest question. I don't know if they can.
I think the Second Amendment, as interpreted by this court, I don't necessarily agree that
Do
the
it.
Second...
Do it.
Wait.
Do it.
I don't...
Do it.
Wait. Whoa. Listen. Second Amendment...
Tell me they can buy guns.
Second Amendment...
That's right. Load them up.
The Second Amendment is based. Listen, and I don't necessarily agree with the court's interpretation as applied in Heller and in the follow-on case McDonald, but that is the precedent of the Supreme Court.
Fuck am I supposed to do?
It says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's people. In the same logic that would protect non-citizens with respect to searches and seizures, which would protect them for torture, right? You agree that the government can't inflict cruel and unusual punishment to illegal immigrants. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
You agree with that?
So,
do you agree with that, yes or no?
That they can't torture illegal?
They can't torture illegal immigrants, right?
I agree with that.
Okay. And so you also agree that they can't be subject to unreasonable searches and seizures, right? Fair?
That's due process.
Okay. So why would they not be protected by...
Dude, you know what? Pisco is winning here because he's got Tim Pool agreeing with him along the way. He's walking Tim Pool down the road. Pisco might actually be the exact type of person to go in on this exact type of thing, right? God damn it, Sondsol. What? What did I do? What did I do? I did nothing. Paused. Oh, I was just saying that, like, just the fact that he's getting Tim Pool to agree with him, like, one baby step at a time, right? And the conservative guy is losing Tim. Like, just the fact, yeah, like, this might be like exactly the type of person that we need to go on to Tim Pool's stuff, right? Maybe the really autistic, like, one step at a time, dragging you, kicking and screaming to the end of the line of logic, right? Maybe that is exactly what we need at this moment in time. I wouldn't have thought it would be, because that's really annoying to have to deal with, right? But maybe, just maybe, that's what we need. I gotta go here, take my shekels. Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. Where is my... All right, we got that. Let's
In the same logic that would protect non-citizens with respect to searches and seizures, which would protect them for torture, right? You agree that the government can't inflict cruel and unusual punishment to illegal immigrants. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
You agree with that?
So,
do you agree with that, yes or no?
That they can't torture illegal?
They can't torture illegal immigrants, right?
I agree with that.
Okay. And so you also agree that they can't be subject to unreasonable searches and seizures, right? Fair?
That's due process.
Okay. So why would they not be protected by the Second Amendment?
Yeah. I mean, yes. We've bumped into this one quite a bit because, I've known for some time that the Constitution applies to all peoples here. And the reason that it does, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is that if the Fourth Amendment didn't, there'd be no Fourth Amendment.
Absolutely.
They'd be able to say, we just think you're not a citizen, so now we're going to raid your house.
Yeah.
So no. You can't raid someone's house just because
you're not a citizen.
Yeah, because the protection is for an individual, not the interpretation of whether they're here legally or not. And so the question then comes to guns, because Second Amendment says the people. So I'm like, can illegal immigrants buy guns in this country?
So
I want everybody.
You're saying when it says the people, that's a limitation that carves out.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying because that the Second Amendment says I never really considered Tim's question before. I think it's an interesting question.
And think about the recent precedent.
I need to explain to you where I'm coming from with respect to this, with respect to illegal aliens, because I do believe very firmly that our Constitution, when we're first forming our government, our founders have in mind, why do we have a government in the first place? It's in order to help facilitate and secure the safety of our people. But we have this grave concern, and that concern is very obvious based on history, that once you put a government in power, however that government is run, whether it's democracy or something else, that invariably they're going to crush the people. So we're going to set up not a democracy, which we're not at all a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, and that constitution will safeguard the individual from the powers that this group of individuals has given the government. And the reason we have this government here is to basically keep those citizens safe from outsiders, so we don't have
sounds like a liberal
bans.
Justice, because what you're saying is that there's a general purpose for general welfare.
What I'm saying is,
I'm going to interpret these words however I want.
I'm switching into the constitutional theory, not based on like this case here or that statute there. I'm just analyzing now. I asked you in the beginning, let's talk about the law. We explored that for 30 minutes. Now at this point, I'm talking to you as far as constitutional.
We haven't run to ground. We haven't run to ground. I want to know if Tim Pool agrees that this deportation is legitimate, or whether you're going to say you're agnostic about it. I want to know whether you think that this attempted deportation is okay to do or not.
I think it's okay to do.
Why do you think it's okay to do?
Why, though?
I think that this is the next question I was getting into as pertains to the Constitution. The idea that we're going to try and interpret the Constitution, to me, has become largely meaningless outside of the initial 7 articles. The construction of government makes a lot of sense. People often say, they'll say what Trump is doing or what Biden is doing is unconstitutional. They're usually referring to the Bill of Rights, which have never been universally understood ever. For instance, blasphemy and obscenity were illegal. Literally after they ratified the Constitution, you walked outside and screamed obscenities, you'd be arrested, literally arrested. George Carlin was arrested in the 70s for swearing. Like there was no universal.
There have been bad times in our history where we have not been true to the Constitution.
No, but
John Adams passed the Sedition Acts, where it literally was a crime to insult the president. All right,
so and then it got pulled back.
Correct.
So my point is, as it pertains to the Second Amendment,
this is boring.
Our current
100% government is there to protect rights. It doesn't grant them yet. Yet, what if how an enemy could use that against us and infiltrate, provocateur, slow invasion? I have no idea what the fuck you're trying to get at there, son. Listen. I think Pisco did pretty good here. I think he did really good in the section that we watched. We're not watching the whole thing because this is already starting to, it feels like we're looping over and over and over. It feels like Pisco just got Tim Pool up to the point of saying like, yeah, no, obviously that would be like bad. I don't agree with it. And then Tim Pool's just like, actually, no. Oh yeah, don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe to the YouTube. That's very important. Use your Amazon Primes and shit, you know? I don't know. Okay, bye.